Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled Parent Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today, entitled Mom Thinks Anyone Can Sit on a Motorcycle Because They Don't Have Doors. After that, the time I fought a jealous girlfriend with a broom. And after that, call the police? Sure. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to sit on someone else's motorcycle. Too bad you don't even have one, Reddit boy. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Entitled Mom Thinks Anyone Can Sit on a Motorcycle Because They Don't Have Doors. First things first, my car is in the shop at the moment because my 20-year-old car makes even funnier noises than normal. I still have to get to work and public transport isn't that great if you work hospital shifts. But I have another way of transportation, a pretty old motorcycle. A BMW R75-5 built in 1970, 50 horsepower engine and a smooth top speed of 175 kilometers per hour. I mostly drive it in the summer for fun on tours with my cousin and a friend. But hey, it's August, so I can pull the ride out of the garage of my parents' house and drive it now. I love this bike because I got it from my grandpa who passed in 2016. I shared his love of motorcycles, unlike my dad. So my grandma got the house and I got the bike. So I drive it from and to work. And today, before my day shift, I stopped at the local supermarket for some gross microwave food, a pack of Marlboros, and a big can of Monster Energy. So I parked my bike and went in for maybe 10 minutes. And when I came back out, there's some girl sitting on my bike while her mother was taking pictures of her. There was a boy too who just stood beside them. The girl was like 16ish and the boy was in elementary school age. Me. Excuse me, what are you doing? Entitled Mom. Just taking pictures of my daughter. Me. Any particular reason you're doing it on my motorcycle? Oh, my daughter just loves vintage things. Me. Yeah, well, get off. I need to get to work. The girl. Oh, come on. I need a good-looking picture, and my mom hasn't gotten a good one yet. Me. I don't care. Get off of my property. Entitled Mom. Don't you yell at my kid, boy. Boy? Lady, I'm in my mid-20s. It's perfectly fine and you can wait. My daughter is an influencer, you know. Okay, that's the point where I was really upset. I'm a chill guy, but some things just really tick me off. And one of these things is disrespecting others' property right next to calling me just a nurse. Me. Oh yeah? What would you say if I said in your car? Because it's perfectly fine. Entitled Mom. Ugh, that is completely different. I mean, cars have doors and motorcycles don't. Me. Fine, okay. Get off. When I got loud, the girl got off the bike and I put my helmet back on. Always wear a helmet, kids. That's from an ER nurse who has seen people without helmets being yeeted into the street or other vehicles. Entitled Mom. Don't you yell at my kids. Me. Then don't let your dumb kids sit on my bike and maybe teach your kids some manners. Don't tell me how to raise my kids. I then simply gave up talking to this lady. The boy besides me gave me a "I'm sorry" look, and I nodded at him while starting the engine and leaving the parking lot. The mother yelled, "Jerk," while I drove off to my day shift. I'm at home now and told my girlfriend this story. She just shrugged and told me, "Welcome to the world of modern parents." Yep, complaining to an elementary school teacher about parents wasn't that good of an idea, I think. So here's the moral of the story. Don't sit on people's bikes to pose. There is a special spot in heck for wannabe biker posers. And motorcycles are just like cars. I mean, you don't jump into a convertible and then tell the owner it's okay because it doesn't have a roof. Call the police? Sure. In our mid-20s, my husband and I purchased and moved into our rather modest first house with our infant daughter. I made a big effort to meet and befriend our neighbors, and all of them warned me to be careful of one particular person, Jane. Jane had lived on the street for 3 years at this point and had earned herself the nickname Big Fat Jane, as she was manipulating, intimidating, and thoroughly awful. Jane ran a daycare from her house, but neighbors on both sides reported hearing her scream at them and leave them unsupervised in the garden. It's important to note that Jane's partner is a police officer. The neighbors were scared of retaliation if they reported her or stood up to her. It seemed Jane would use this to get away with her horrific behavior. Our house had a driveway with a dropped curb big enough for one car, but we could fit both in if you blocked in the first and only used the second car. Parking on the street was very limited, and we had double yellow lines outside our house, not allowed to stop or park there. During some essential roof work, our driveway was taken up by scaffolding, so we parked in the street, and my husband parked outside Jane's house. The next day, when he went to see his car, Jane came running down her path, shouting at him. She screamed at him about his antisocial parking, that his car would be towed, and that he could expect it to be scratched up if he left it there any longer. My husband calmly explained it was a public road, and she did not have the right to police the space. Her screeches at this point were loud enough that I and several neighbors heard and came to see the commotion. Her partner was perched at the door during all of this, saying and doing nothing. When she saw me on the pavement with our daughter, she pointed and screamed, "You'll have the social on you if you don't buzz off. I'll scratch you right up." At this point, I told my husband to come back and we were calling the police. She responded, "Call the police. I dare you. He's," pointing at her partner, "a policeman. He'll sort you out. You won't know what hit you." At this point, my husband looked at her husband and said, "Is that right? And you're agreeing with what she said?" The partner nodded and said, "You need to move or accept the consequences. You call the police, it won't get you anywhere." Funny enough, when I then took out my phone and dialed the non-police emergency number on speakerphone and made a police report, both of them looked a lot less confident. Jane stood there open-mouthed and grabbed her partner and slammed the door, and we haven't heard from her since. Her partner was placed on suspension due to the allegation and further allegations from our neighbors. He then returned to an admin role. After our confrontation, Jane was giving a warning for a public order offense. However, due to a number of reports, her daycare was closed and she is no longer able to run it. Their house is up for sale. However, as she made a number of modifications without proper planning or works people, its price is significantly lower than they expected and they're in negative equity. All because of a parking space. Karen screams at another table for stealing hers and forces them up. So I was scrolling on TikTok and found a story that reminded me of this gym when I was working last summer. At my restaurant, we take 30-minute call-aheads. Absolutely no reservations. If you're in a large party, you need the whole party to be set, but we are lenient if it's, say, a 13 top and 10 of the guests are there. So I'm working a double, and I help at the host stand when I get bored during the slow hours. I remember answering this lady's call ahead for her 11 to 13 top, and it was only around $3.50 or so. I told her no problem, we will put her name down. We have over half our tables outside and clearly 2 tables specifically for larger parties. Only a few minutes go by and it's a little after 4 when she comes in with her mother and I tell her she's more than welcome to enjoy a drink at the bar while she waits for her party to arrive. They go to the bar and then seat themselves at one of the large party tables as they're next to each other through our large open slider doors. I go over and say the typical, "I'm sorry ma'am, but you cannot sit here until your entire party has arrived. It's policy, but you're again welcome to sit at the bar." She laughs and says, "Oh sorry," and they move over. So far, no big deal. During this time, we start getting lots of calls for call-aheads, and we have happy hour so the guests start pouring in. I'm one of the servers that will have one of the large party tables in my section, so it's 50-50 I serve her. We end up getting multiple large parties coming in, and it's closer to 5 at this point, and she still only has her mom and her at the bar. Our hosts go and seat one of the 2 large party tables, a party of 8 for a different server. As soon as the other server, we will call Jay, goes over and is in the middle of her greet, Karen decides to go over and scream at them and Jay, saying how dare she serve people at her table and screaming at the guests that they have to get up, that it's not their table and she has a reservation. These poor people actually get up and she immediately seats her and her mom there. Jay grabs our manager and she refuses to get up as her party members finally started to arrive. Jay refuses to serve this table and asked us to swap, which I do because I don't mind difficult guests. GM goes over and very plainly tells Karen what she did was wrong and probably spent 15 minutes going back and forth with her. In the end, she agrees to pay for a full round of drinks for them. I go over immediately, do my greet, and get their drinks and app orders. GM hands me the bill for the round of drinks from the other party's table, and I go over and hand it to her. She immediately is red and fuming, saying there's no way a round of drinks for 8 adults cost $130 and states she will only pay $40 worth. I just walk away and get GM and say that she won't pay the bill, and I keep serving the rest of the guests. One of her friends pulls me aside to ask what's going on, and I quickly explain, and she's horrified. Karen does this a lot apparently, but promised no drama as it was a special occasion. As I'm at the table talking to Karen's friend, she yells at the manager and screams that how dare she be forced to pay. My manager looks her in the eye and says, "It's not my problem you forced other guests up from their table. You will pay this bill and then you will leave, or I will call the authorities." Insert shocked Pikachu face. She then demands her beverage and apps, so I run over and grab it all to go and bring it right back with her bill for her items. Her boyfriend ends up paying for the drinks, and my manager stood next to her the entire time and said, "Don't forget to tip 20% for your atrocious behavior to my staff." Y'all, I about lost it. She ended up leaving 15 minutes after, and I got a wonderful tip from her party. But I couldn't believe the absolute entitlement that she had displayed. Over a table, when there was an exact same table 6 feet away. Literally, honey, your people aren't there. So, duh, we're gonna seat one of the tables. Edit to add. I never thought I'd have to say this, but if you agree with how this Karen acted, you are part of the problem. Edit 2. Our drink prices range typically $13 to $18. We're a tequila bar. Our drinks and food cost money because it's a high-end restaurant in South Florida on the water. Won't pay for my coffee? How about a hotel room, 3-course meal, and breakfast? I used to work for a company in the UK based in London, but with regular travel all around the country. We had very long hours and were required to be on site when work began at 7:30 a.m., but you could be hundreds of miles away. You were allowed to stay away, but you had to get approval from a senior manager, usually only agreed through gritted teeth because of the difficult expenses policy and the wrath of the senior manager who approved the expenses. More on this guy soon. I used to get up early, commute all around the country, often doing 2 to 3 hours in the car at a time. Most often stopping to fuel the car or just have a break, usually grabbing some breakfast and a coffee, because I was often leaving the house before it was palatable to eat breakfast. I was young and conscientious, so would buy my own breakfast, but buy a coffee separately and keep the receipt for expenses. Usually a 5-pound breakfast and a 3-pound coffee. Our expenses policy allowed me to put the whole lot on expenses, but I was conscientious. Anyway, after months of this, I submit my expense claim. My immediate manager approves it without batting an eyelid, as he can see the addresses on the receipts and the timestamps. So once a manager has approved it, the expenses would go to one senior manager to approve for maybe 200 to 300 claims a week. Major trust issues and seriously backwards. One morning, early at the head office, the senior manager comes into my office and tells me to follow him. I follow him to the office where he explains to me that the company isn't here to buy me coffee. Long story short, I'm told to stop playing fast and loose with the expense policy. I wasn't, and follow the rules. Here's the malicious compliance. Speaking to HR, they had a policy about work-related driving and EU Working Time Directive, which meant that all the early starts and late finishes had to stop immediately because it was breaching policy and the law. So the next time I had to be on site for 7:30 and was 2 to 3 hours away, I stayed in a hotel the night before. 3-course meal and breakfast all in line with expenses policy and working time policies. This continued for about a month because you can only submit expenses for payment in the last week before payday. My expenses went from £100 a month to £1,000 a month. Expenses submitted, manager approved, sent to the senior manager. I get a phone call to come to HQ the next day for a talk with the senior manager and HR. The following day I attend, get an absolute roasting. What the heck did I say? Who do you think you are? When I could get a word in, I explained how I was traveling in line with company policy, health and safety legislation, whilst also complying with the expense policy to the letter. HR confirmed, nothing he could do. Needless to say, the policy was changed some months later. I felt much better because I was well rested, fed, and working the hours I was being paid for. Am I the jerk for making my brother leave after he brought his kids to my child-free wedding? My wife and I got married days ago. We decided the wedding will be child-free. We thought this was the best option considering several factors from budget to keeping the order, etc. Everyone got an invitation, but my biggest concern was how my brother, Ramsey, 36, was going to react. Ramsey married young and has 4 kids that he takes everywhere he and his wife go. They're always there at every family event. The kids are grade A hyperactive to say the least. I gave Ramsey the invitation in person, and he read it out loud in a sarcastic tone, then said, "Child-free? Ha!" I nodded, and he got somewhat mad, saying, "Are you serious? But my kids have never been excluded from any event, big or small, let alone their own uncle's wedding." I said, "I'm sorry, but it's already been decided, and everyone has to follow the rules, not just you." He stared off for a minute, then to my surprise, he said, "I totally get it, man. No kids means no kids. No worries." I was glad he didn't start an argument over it and seemed to accept the rule. The day of the wedding came, and Ramsey and his wife didn't show up until shortly before the ceremony began. My best man notified me that Ramsey had arrived and had all of his kids with him. I was legit mad. I went to meet him at the entrance and saw he brought all the kids against me and my wife's wishes. I greeted the kids and asked my sister-in-law to take them back to the car. He loudly asked what the heck was wrong with me. I asked why he brought his kids and who said it was okay. He said no one, but he was planning on bringing the kids all along and figured that by initially agreeing to my rule, then showing up with the kids anyway would get me to agree on letting them stay. I stated this was no event for kids for many reasons and that everyone respected the rule except him. He complained about me disrespecting him and his kids since, again, he's never attended any events without them. In his words, "Wherever I go, my kids follow, period." I told him he needed to leave then. Not only did he call me a lunatic, but a terrible brother and a terrible uncle. He also called me names for agreeing to my wife's stupid rule, saying that if it was him and his wife even hinted he couldn't have the family's kids at their wedding, he would have dropped her right then and there. It was humiliating and loud enough for the guests to notice. My in-laws did too. I told him to leave, and that's when my mom and aunt tried to convince me to let it go and let them stay. But I refused and had him leave after a massive argument between us. To say that I felt absolutely horrible is an understatement. Everyone gave me grief ever since that incident, and they are siding with Ramsey, saying I wronged him and acted cold towards him and his kids when they showed up to celebrate with me and my wife. My dad is especially upset at me for potentially permanently messing up my relationship with Ramsey, his wife, and his kids by kicking them out of my wedding. He quoted, "Ramsey won't ever forget this day." Am I the jerk? You don't care if I change your subscription to premium, do you? So this actually happened just yesterday, and the entitled person in question is my dad. For a long time now, Dad has been asking for my Netflix password, but I wouldn't give it to him. I didn't care if he used my Netflix, but I knew him well enough to know he'd happily give out my password to anybody who wanted it. He had openly admitted that he wanted his second ex-wife to have it. He had continually asked for my password, but I refused. 3 days ago, I offered a compromise. I wouldn't give him my password, but I would log him in and make him a profile. He agreed, so I went to his house to set it up. At first, he seemed grateful. Yesterday, I got an email from Netflix that my subscription plan has changed. I checked and saw that it had been upgraded to a premium subscription. I immediately changed it back, but I would have to still pay the increased price this month. I called Dad and asked if he had changed the subscription. He initially denied it was him, so I told him I was going to have to change the password again. "Oh, I might have done something to Netflix," he quickly said. The moment I mentioned the password, "I was pressing buttons. I don't know what I was doing, but I might have changed the subscription." I told him that he had changed it to a more expensive subscription, but he just said it was only a few bucks more. Then he tried to distract me by asking if I had ever watched Supernatural, as he had supposedly just discovered it, but I steered the conversation back. I didn't believe it had been an accident, but I just told him to be more careful. His story suddenly shifted as he claimed Netflix forced him to upgrade. He said it kept asking him if he wanted to watch it in HD, and he tried to cancel it 4 times. When he had finally accepted, it upgraded his subscription. Of course, I didn't believe that story either, but I learned long ago it's best just to drop things with him. Later that evening, he called Mom. He was mad that I had changed the subscription since it wasn't that much more expensive. Netflix had forced him, and he really couldn't tell any difference between SD and HD. He actually was pouting and told her that I could just cancel his account since he wouldn't watch it anyway. And that is why I had to change my password again. You can't cash that check without an account. We had a hailstorm in my area and my car was pummeled with the hail. Not a huge deal, as most dentless hail repairs will do it for way cheaper than your insurance pays. Call my insurance and they scheduled me for 3 days later on a Sunday of all things. Lady shows up and takes photos and prints me off a settlement check on the spot. With a slight problem being that the check is written out to me and the national financing company I bought my car from years ago. Somehow, when I paid off my car, they never released my title and I never noticed. I now cannot deposit my check without NFC releasing their claim on my car, which has been paid off for at least 10 years by this point. After some calling around and jumping through hoops, I'm told if I go to National Bank that issued my insurance check with some paperwork from NFC releasing all claims on my car, I could cash my insurance check. Fine, but stupid National Bank isn't in my town and it's a 45-minute drive to said National Bank. I verified everything by speaking with a manager at the nearest bank and verified all I needed was the letters, my ID, and the check, and he would cash my check. I show up and head to a teller like the local manager told me to do and presented all of the required documentation. The teller asked me what my account number was. I told her I didn't have one. She informed me that checks over a certain amount could not be cashed if a person did not have an account with them. I informed her that the manager told me that I could cash this check if I showed the required documentation. She informed me that he didn't know what he was talking about and called him over. They had a nice private conversation and collectively informed me that the teller was correct and I had to have an account. Funny enough, as I walked up to the bank, a sign was informing people that if new users signed up for an account and deposited an amount smaller than my insurance check, you would get a $250 sign-up bonus. I asked what was required to set up an account, and lo and behold, it took a whole 10 minutes to set up my new account and about a week for the check to clear and to get my $250 bonus. Transferred everything but the required amount to keep the account open because you had to close out in person. I think it was $10 or under. Am I the jerk for walking out of an interview for the way the guy behaved? This is still a little fresh, and for some reason, when I, 27 male, told it to a friend, they seemed to think I was the jerk for my reaction. I usually work freelance, but a buddy of mine owns a small business and is desperately looking for new people to hire. They asked me to come in for an interview. This was just a formality since he always wanted me for this position regardless. To be honest, I wasn't so sure I wanted the job, but thought it wouldn't hurt to come in anyways. He said I could start part-time and work my way to full-time if I like it. My friend left some other guy in charge of interviews who's a manager that works under him. Not only was this dude a half hour late, but every couple sentences out of his mouth, he'd be telling me to pause because his phone would go off and he needed to respond. I know for a fact it wasn't work-related because who laughs at texts that aren't personal? Anyways, was already annoyed, but what really ticked me off was when he looked at my resume and saw my last name. My last name is Hummingbird. My dad's dad came from Native American background, although he and I actually don't know much about it. This guy sees my last name and laughs. He says,
"Wait, seriously, that's your last name?"
Told him, yeah, what's the big deal? Guy keeps laughing and he says sorry, not judging me, just still getting used to some of the crazy names people give themselves. Well, first I told him about my surname and what makes him think it's okay to laugh at somebody's name. After I just got up and said this isn't working, I'd rather not work along someone like him. Guy was immediately apologetic and wanted me to come back because his boss, my friend, will lose it. But I kept walking. The whole thing got on my nerves. Couple hours later, my friend is asking me what happened. He wasn't mad, but he wanted to know why I changed my mind. Still haven't told him exactly what it was since the guy looked panicked, so I don't know about getting him in trouble with my friend. But the reason friend thinks I'm the jerk is because it was super rude to just get up and leave when the guy was simply joking around, and sure he wasn't trying to be mean intentionally. Not sure really if I was the jerk for the way I reacted. Edit. Okay, yes, I will be telling my friend about this. I agree, he's got a right to know what this guy is doing and how it could affect his business. Thanks, Reddit. Entitled parent decides to mess with me in the checkout line. I finally had my Karen in the Wild experience yesterday morning. I live in the southeastern US, and we have a popular small box retailer here with a yellow sign and black letters. They are all over the rural South and in many places act as grocery and general stores to the community. I needed to stop and get an item for my vehicle before I ran morning errands, so I dropped in at our local neighborhood store, found the item and a couple of other things I wanted, and got in line. I am very conscientious about wearing a mask when I go out and steering very clear of those who don't. The line was fairly long for a Saturday morning, and I was then third or fourth customer in line. This store funnels all customers into a sort of a tunnel lined with impulse purchases, lighters, candy, magazines, small toys, that sort of thing, for checkout, and there are 3 cashier stations along the line. Only one was manned at that point. The customer in front of me was a late 30-ish woman with a daughter who looked to be about 10 or so. This was entitled Mom and OK Kid. The kid wasn't so bad. She had on a cute dog face mask, but entitled Mom wasn't wearing one at all. She was pushing a half-full cart of items. OK Kid asks for a candy bar, and entitled Mom says it's okay. Kid reaches for a nearby bar of candy. Then entitled Mom starts looking at the candy, scanning the rows, and her eyes find what she wants near where I am standing. Luckily, the person behind me was not only standing at least 6 feet back, but had a cart between us as well. So as the entitled Mom came towards me, I started backing away. She kept coming closer, and I kept backing up, which she noticed. When I hit the cart behind me, she smiled at me and said, "Looks like you're trapped," and kept coming towards me. Well, I walk with a cane. At that point, I raised the cane so that it was between us and said, "Please stop coming towards me. You aren't wearing a mask." She stopped and laughed, then said, "Are you going to hit me with your cane, old lady?" I glared at her and said, "If you come any closer, I will. I'm feeling very threatened." She laughed again, then put her hand up to her ear and said, "What? Couldn't hear you. Say again. Your mask is making it hard to understand you." And laughing. Then her daughter started laughing too. About that time, another employee came over to open the second register, which I was standing directly in front of. Usually they say, "I can help the next customer here." But instead, she said, "I can ring you up, ma'am," to me. I put my purchases down on the counter, and she reached for the first item to scan. Entitled Mom said, "Hey, wait, I was next," and started backing up toward me again, with her cart in tow. The cashier said, "Ma'am, you have already passed me. The next cashier will have to take care of you." Entitled Mom didn't like this, but turned back forward to see the first cashier had already finished ringing up the customer in front of Entitled Mom and had turned her station light off, signaling that she was closed. Entitled Mom said, "Hey, where are you going? You haven't rung me up." The first cashier said, "Sorry, I'm scheduled for my break now, and I will get written up if I don't go on time," and walked away out the door. Entitled Mom is now fuming and turns back to the second cashier. Entitled Mom waits for my cashier to be done with my purchase, then starts to back up again. This makes it impossible for me to leave, as we are in that tunnel, and I said, "Ma'am, you are going to have to go forward and leave the tunnel so I can get out." She stops and says, "Oh, just squish by me. You act like I have the plague or something." I looked directly at her and said, "As far as I am concerned, you do." She huffed and pushed her cart forward and out of the tunnel, and I was able to squeeze by her safely. Behind me, I heard the cashier start ringing up the customer behind me who had a pretty full cart, and I turned and saw that the line behind me had 5 people in it now. The Entitled Mom yelled, "Hey, I was next!" And as I was going out the door, she turned her buggy back into the tunnel the wrong way. Then I heard the cashier say, "Ma'am, you can't come back in here the wrong way. You have to get back in line." Unintelligible barking came from the Entitled Mom as I went out the door. I admitted, I was grinning behind the mask. As I was getting into my vehicle, the first cashier was around the corner of the store having a smoke break. She finished her cigarette, put it in the ash post, and said, "I hate people like that. We love messing with them. Sorry she bothered you." I laughed out loud at that point and said, "Hey, this will make a good story for Reddit." She laughed too and went on in the store. No idea what Entitled Mom did after that, but I noticed as I passed her when I left the store that she was wearing a scrub top for a local pediatrician's office. Think I might make a phone call on Monday asking them how they feel about one of their staff terrorizing those in the community who choose to wear a mask and socially distance. P.S. Ladies, if either of you read this, thank you. I appreciate you being there for us. Am I the jerk for kicking out my sister after she tried to flirt with my husband? I, 27 female, have a little sister, Emily, who's 20. My husband, 27 male, and I have been together since our college days. Back when we started dating, Emily then seemed to have this little crush on my husband, then boyfriend. She would blush in his presence, stutter while talking to him, etc. We assumed that the crush went away as she grew older, and her behavior indicated so. My husband thinks of Emily as the little sister he never had and treats her as such. We've not had much contact with Emily over the years as we live in a different state at the other side of the country, and she's been busy with her schooling. Last week, my parents and Emily were visiting our house for my birthday weekend. From the moment Emily arrived, she would not stop flirting with my husband, from excessively complimenting everything he did to proclaiming things like they would make a great pair, etc. My husband looked very uncomfortable, and so did my parents. I don't know how we got through the dinner. After the evening was done, my husband asked me if there was something wrong with Emily, and why was she behaving like that? He said she made him very uncomfortable and asked me to talk to her. So I found her alone and tried telling her that it was fine if she had/has a crush, but it's never fine to make anyone uncomfortable. I told her that it would be nice if she kept her distance for the remaining 2 days they were here, since he was not okay with this behavior. She said she wasn't being flirty or improper. I told her that she was indeed being inappropriate and that it was very creepy that she would try to flirt with my husband. She got very defensive and said that I was being insecure, and I quote, "If I was really flirting with him, you wouldn't stand a chance." I lost it at this point and told her that she's no longer welcome in our house and should buzz off the first thing in the morning. Emily and my parents left the very next day, even though my dad agreed that Emily's behavior throughout the evening was very inappropriate and that she should apologize to my husband. Mom thinks nothing of that sort happened, and all three of us are being delusional, and that it was a wrong move to kick Emily, and by extension her, out of my house when they had traveled all the way here. Am I the jerk?
Click this button to join as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
And come watch this video next. You won't believe what happens.